You're not actually expecting to be a guest, are you, Fiona? Ariel's voice, dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for gum on the sole of her $1,000 shoes, cut through the clatter of my mother's teacups. I sighed, not bothering to look up from the book I wasn't really reading. My name is Fiona, and that was my sister, Ariel, the golden child, the princess, the one who could do no wrong. And I was just Fiona, the spare part, the one who didn't quite fit their glossy, perfect picture. We were in the morning room of Heartstone Manor, sunlight streaming through the towering arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Dust motes I'd probably be asked to deal with later. Heartstone? Even the name sounded grand, imposing. I loved this old house, every creaking floorboard and hidden alcove, more than any of them ever could. They just saw it as a backdrop for their perfect lives. For me, it was the only constant, a silent witness to years of being the family footnote. My mother, Clara, placed her china cup down with a delicate click, her perfectly manicured fingers fluttering. Ariel, dear, that's not a kind way to put it. Her tone, however, lacked any real conviction. It was the same placid disapproval she used when Ariel complained about the caviar not being beluga. Well, it's true, isn't it? Ariel flicked a strand of her salon-perfect blonde hair over her shoulder, her eyes, the same cool blue as our father's, sizing me up. I was in my usual attire, jeans and a worn sweater. Not exactly gala-ready, but then I wasn't usually invited to their galas. Fiona, my father Earl boomed, finally lowering his newspaper. His voice always filled whatever room he was in, demanding attention. Your mother and I have been discussing the annual Heart Gala. He paused, as if bestowing a great honour. And we've decided you can be involved this year. I raised an eyebrow. Involved how? Am I finally allowed to breathe the same air as your esteemed guests? Clara gasped softly. Fiona, really? Your father is trying to be generous. Generous? Ariel snorted. She should be grateful. It's the event of the season. Earl waved a dismissive hand. Enough, both of you. Fiona, the point is, we need reliable help. The caterers are always stretched, and frankly, some of the temporary staff they hire are subpar. He shuddered theatrically. We need someone to ensure things run smoothly. Discreetly, of course. I felt a familiar cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew where this was going. It was the same path it always took. And you thought of me? Well, yes, Clara said, a little too brightly. You're available, and you know the house. Someone has to do the dirty work, Fiona, Ariel chimed in, a smirk playing on her lips. Someone needs to make sure the guest bathrooms stay pristine, collect empty glasses, that sort of thing. And you're so good at tidying. The memory of last year's spring fling flashed in my mind. I'd been tasked with polishing silver in the scullery for 6 hours, while the sound of laughter and music drifted in, a constant reminder of where I wasn't. The year before that, it was helping the gardeners trim the rose bushes for their summer party, my hands raw and bleeding, only to be told I looked too scruffy to be seen by the arriving guests. Each humiliation was a carefully placed stone, building a wall of resentment inside me. It's a wonderful opportunity for you, dear, Clara continued, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant of the sting in Ariel's words, to see how things are done, to be part of such an important family tradition, even in a small way. A small way, I repeated, my voice flat. Precisely, Earl said, nodding with satisfaction as if he'd solved a particularly troublesome equation. You can wear a simple black dress. Blend in. We'll even compensate you, of course. A nominal fee. And it's not like you have anything better to do, Ariel added, her gaze flicking over me with unconcealed contempt. Still playing with that silly little online thing of yours? My silly little online thing, as they so lovingly called it, was an e-commerce venture I'd built from scratch, coding late into the night in my tiny rented apartment, fueled by caffeine and a desperate need to carve out something that was solely mine. They knew nothing of its success, of the hours I poured into it, of the independence it was slowly granting me. To them, I was just Fiona, The perpetual underachiever, the family charity case. It keeps me busy, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Well, this will keep you busier, Earl declared, folding his newspaper with an air of finality. The gala is in 2 weeks. Be here early on the day. Mrs. Periwinkle, our head housekeeper, will give you your specific duties, mostly serving drinks and, as Ariel mentioned, keeping the powder rooms powdered. He chuckled at his own wit. Clara tittered politely. Ariel rolled her eyes, probably annoyed he'd stolen her thunder. I looked from one self-satisfied face to another. The opulence of Heartstone Manor, the fine china, the expensive clothes. It was all a glittering facade, hiding the rot underneath. They saw me as a fixture, a convenient, unpaid or barely paid servant they could summon at will. They saw me as nothing. I forced a small, compliant smile. Of course. I'd be happy to help. Ariel looked momentarily surprised, then suspicious. Clara beamed. Oh, wonderful, dear. I knew you'd see sense. Earl grunted, already turning back to his paper. Good. That's settled then. I stood up, the unread book still in my hand. If you'll excuse me, I have a few things to take care of. Don't be late for your shift, Cinder Fiona, Ariel called after me as I walked towards the door, her laughter echoing in the grand hallway. I didn't look back. I walked out of the morning room, through the marble-floored hall, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors who probably wouldn't have approved of any of us. They wanted me to clean their toilets. They wanted me to be invisible, a shadow in their brilliant, sparkling world. They had no idea I was about to own the entire damn house. Let the party preparations begin. On my terms. I'll be there, I told Ariel later that day, my voice carefully devoid of emotion. We were in the kitchen, and she was meticulously arranging fruit in a bowl, as if it were a work of art. Early, as instructed. She didn't even look at me. Good. Don't wear those dreadful trainers. You'll track mud everywhere. A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. Mother actually thinks you're looking forward to it. Pathetic. I just nodded. Let them think what they wanted. Their satisfaction was a crucial ingredient in my plan. My silly little online thing, as Ariel so charmingly put it, was called The Weaver's Nest. It started 4 years ago, born from a frustration with mass-produced everything and a love for unique, handcrafted items. I'd always had an eye for quality, a knack for finding obscure artisans. I taught myself web design, product photography, and digital marketing, fueled by countless late nights and cheap coffee in my cramped apartment. The first year was a struggle, packing orders on my bedroom floor, reinvesting every penny. Then, a popular design blogger stumbled upon one of my curated ceramic collections. Sales exploded. I expanded, adding textiles, then small batch leather goods, then unique jewellery. I kept it anonymous, operating under the company name, my identity carefully shielded. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family flaunted their inherited wealth, I was quietly building a small fortune through sheer hard work, something they wouldn't understand or respect even if they knew. The idea of buying Heartstone Manor hadn't even been a flicker in my mind until about 6 months ago. I was at the house, summoned as usual for some menial task. I think it was sorting through old boxes in the attic that Clara just couldn't face. I'd gone into Father's study to find a marker pen. He wasn't there, but a crumpled, official-looking envelope lay half-hidden in his wastepaper basket. Final notice was printed in stark red letters. My curiosity, a trait they'd always tried to squash, got the better of me. I smoothed it out. It was from a bank I didn't recognise, detailing overdue mortgage payments on Heartstone Manor and threatening foreclosure. My blood ran cold. Earl, with all his bluster about legacy and financial acumen, was about to lose the ancestral home. It seemed impossible, but the numbers on the page didn't lie. Years of extravagant spending, bad investments he'd bragged about at dinner parties, and a complete lack of actual income beyond slowly dwindling inheritances had finally caught up with them. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of Heartstone being sold off to strangers, its history erased, was unbearable. Then, A wild, audacious idea began to form. Could I buy it? My business was doing incredibly well. I had substantial savings, and my latest quarterly profits had been exceptional. The next morning, I found Leonardo. He was a lawyer specializing in discrete property acquisitions, recommended through an online forum for entrepreneurs. His office was minimalist, modern, a world away from the stuffy old money firms my father favored. "Mr. Fisher," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "I have a rather unusual proposition." I laid out the situation, omitting only the familial connection for the initial consultation. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is unorthodox, but not impossible. If the property is indeed in pre-foreclosure, and your finances are as robust as you indicate, a swift, anonymous purchase is feasible." He paused. "Are you prepared for the complexities, Miss—" He'd only known me by my business name until then. "Hart?" I said, a small, bitter smile playing on my lips. "Fiona Hart. And yes, I'm prepared for anything." The next few months were a blur of paperwork, secure communications, and nerve-wracking suspense. Leonardo was a rock, calm and efficient, navigating the legal minefield. We set up a shell corporation to make the purchase, ensuring my name wouldn't appear anywhere until the final deed transfer. Every phone call, every email, felt like walking a tightrope. The fear that Earl would somehow find out, that he'd pull some last-minute string, was constant. He was, after all, a master of appearances and leveraging old connections, even if his actual power was waning. Then, just 3 days before the gala, Leonardo called. "It's done, Fiona. The final papers are ready for your signature. Hartston Manor is yours." I met him at a neutral location, a small, anonymous title office downtown. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and fresh ink. Leonardo slid the documents across the polished table. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. I read through the legalese, the clauses, the final confirmation of transfer. Then I signed my name. Fiona Hart, owner. A wave of something immense washed over me. Relief, triumph, a terrifying sense of power. I looked at the deed, my name clear and bold. Leonardo smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Congratulations, Miss Hart. You played a risky game and you won." I clutched the folder containing the deed to my chest. The ink was dry. Hartstone Manor was mine. Now, all I had to do was play their game one last time before changing all the rules. The day of the gala arrived, cloaked in a crisp autumn chill. I drove up the long, winding driveway of Hartstone Manor, the gravel crunching under my sensible car's tyres, a stark contrast to the sleek sports cars and luxury sedans that would soon fill the courtyard. My car, my driveway, my house. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. Ariel met me at the grand oak front door, her arms crossed, a cheap black polyester uniform draped over one arm. "You're late," she snapped, though I was precisely on time. "And for heaven's sake, use the staff entrance next time. It's around the back." She thrust the uniform at me. "Here, try not to look too much like a scarecrow. Mrs. Periwinkle is having a meltdown about the canapes. Go find her in the kitchen." The uniform felt stiff and scratchy against my skin. It was a size too big, clearly an afterthought. I changed in the small, windowless staff bathroom, the one I'd soon be scrubbing. Looking in the cracked mirror, I barely recognised myself. The ill-fitting dress, the tight bun I'd scraped my hair into. I was the picture of downtrodden servitude. Perfect. Clara swept into the kitchen, a vision in shimmering emerald green, her diamonds catching the light. "Fiona, darling, there you are." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Now, remember, when you're offering drinks, always serve from the guest's right, and no chit-chat. Just a polite, 'May I offer you a beverage?' and then move on. We must maintain standards." "Of course, Mother," I said, my voice a study in meek obedience. Earl strode in, already in his tuxedo, looking every bit the lord of the manor he no longer was. "Ah, Fiona. Good. See that the champagne flutes are polished to a shine, no water spots, and for God's sake try to be invisible. The Nortons are coming tonight. Trent Norton, hugely important for that new venture I'm exploring. He puffed out his chest. Impressions are everything. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Oh, impressions would be made tonight, Father. Just not the ones you're expecting. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. I polished glasses until they gleamed, arranged napkins, and helped the actual catering staff set up their stations. Mrs. Periwinkle, a woman whose permanent expression was one of harried panic, barely registered my presence beyond issuing curt instructions. Guests began to arrive, a parade of expensive perfumes, rustling silks, and booming, artificial laughter. I recognized many of them, faces I'd seen at countless family events, faces that had always looked straight through me. Whitney Boyd, one of Clara's closest confidants, and a woman whose snobbery was legendary, swept past me without a glance, her voice carrying clearly. Clara, darling, the hydrangeas are simply divine. Did you get that new florist from the city? I circulated with a tray of champagne, my eyes scanning the crowd. There was Earl schmoozing Trent Norton with practiced ease, his laughter a little too loud. There was Clara, preening under Whitney's compliments. And there was Ariel, holding court with a group of her vapid friends, her voice high and shrill as she recounted some undoubtedly exaggerated tale. She was trying to catch the eye of Easton Riley, a handsome, somewhat serious-looking young man who seemed more interested in the architectural details of the grand hall than Ariel's chatter. "Oh, Fiona, there you are," Clara said, spotting me. "Whitney was just saying she needs a refill." Whitney turned, her eyes flicking over my uniform with disdain before settling on my face. "Ah, yes, the help." She extended her empty glass. "Champagne, if you please." As I refilled her glass, I overheard Ariel talking to Easton. "It's just dreadful, isn't it? Having to rely on family for basic things, but someone has to pick up the slack when others can't quite manage." Her eyes flicked pointedly in my direction. Later, as I was clearing empty plates from a side table, Ariel, accidentally, bumped into me, her glass of red wine sloshing down the front of my cheap black dress. The wine was cold, staining the fabric instantly. "Oh, clumsy me!" Ariel exclaimed, her voice laced with mock concern, though her eyes danced with malice. A few nearby guests tittered. "So sorry, Fiona, though I suppose it doesn't really matter what you're wearing. Clean that up too, it's what you're good for." I looked down at the spreading stain, then back up at her smug face. A slow smile spread across my own. "Oh, I will," I said, my voice soft but clear enough for her to hear. "I'm going to clean up a lot of things tonight." Her smirk faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes before she tossed her hair and turned away. The storm inside me was no longer just brewing. It was about to break. The grand ballroom of Hartstone Manor pulsed with energy. A string quartet played Vivaldi in one corner, their music a sophisticated backdrop to the cacophony of conversations. Crystal chandeliers, the ones I used to stare at for hours as a child, imagining they were made of frozen stars, cast a warm, golden glow over the scene. Waiters, the real waiters, weaved through the throng with silver trays laden with champagne and intricate canapés. I too moved through the rooms, no longer offering drinks, but observing. My cheap dress, now adorned with a prominent wine stain, only enhanced my camouflage. I was invisible, just as they'd always wanted. Earl was in his element, his voice booming as he held court near the massive stone fireplace. He had Trent Norton cornered, gesturing expansively, no doubt painting a picture of immense financial success that was pure fiction. Clara glided from group to group, her laughter tinkling, a perfect society hostess. She paused to adjust a flower arrangement, her brow furrowed in concentration, completely oblivious to the earthquake about to rupture her carefully constructed world. Ariel was still relentlessly pursuing Easton Riley. I watched them for a moment. She was laying it on thick, batting her eyelashes, touching his arm a little too often. Easton, to his credit, looked increasingly uncomfortable, his polite smiles growing strained. At one point, his gaze drifted across the room and met mine. Just for a second. There was no recognition, of course, but I saw a flicker of something, curiosity, before Ariel reclaimed his attention with a loud, theatrical laugh. He seemed out of place in the sea of artifice, like a lone seagull amidst a flock of peacocks. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the elegant strains of the quartet. The deed, tucked securely inside a plain manila envelope, felt like a lead weight in the pocket of my borrowed apron, the one Mrs. Periwinkle had grudgingly supplied after the wine incident. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, but now, with the reality of it just minutes away, a wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm me. What if I stumbled over my words? What if my voice shook? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was stolen. Not just the house, but my dignity, my voice. Years of being dismissed, belittled and used had led to this. Every condescending remark, every deliberate exclusion, every casual cruelty had been a drop of fuel. And tonight, the pyre was about to be lit. I saw Leonardo slip in through a side door, just as we'd arranged. He gave me a subtle nod from across the room, his expression calm and reassuring. His presence was a quiet anchor in the swirling chaos of my emotions. He wouldn't interfere unless absolutely necessary, but knowing he was there, a silent ally, bolstered my resolve. The chatter in the ballroom began to dim slightly. Earl, beaming, moved towards the ornate, slightly raised dais at one end of the room, where a microphone stood ready. Clara positioned herself beside him, a proud, supportive smile plastered on her face. Ariel, having momentarily abandoned her pursuit of Easton, stood nearby, basking in the reflected glory. This was it, the traditional State of the Heart address, as I privately called it. The moment Earl pontificated about family, legacy, and their supposed contributions to society, he tapped the microphone, the sharp sound cutting through the remaining murmurs. "My dear friends," he began, his voice resonating through the ballroom. "Welcome. Welcome to Heartstone Manor, a place that has been in our family for generations." He launched into his usual spiel, a well-rehearsed monologue of self-congratulation and thinly veiled boasts. He spoke of tradition, of enduring values, of the importance of maintaining standards in an ever-changing world. He gestured towards Clara and Ariel, his voice thick with false sentiment. "My wonderful wife, Clara, the epitome of grace and style, and my darling daughter, Ariel, a shining example of the next generation of the Hearts, ready to carry the torch." Ariel preened. Clara dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. The guests listened with varying degrees of attentiveness, some genuinely captivated, others merely polite. I watched, my gaze fixed on Earl. He was building to his crescendo, the part where he'd undoubtedly announced some grand, fictitious new venture or charitable donation designed to impress people like Trent Norton. My cue. As he paused for dramatic effect, his chest swelling with pride, I began to move. Not from the shadows exactly, but from the periphery, where I'd been hovering. I walked calmly, deliberately, towards the dais. A few heads turned, curious. Ariel frowned, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. What was the help doing, drawing attention to herself? Earl, mid-flow, faltered as he saw me approaching. And so, it is with immense pride that I look towards the future of the Hart family name. I reached the edge of the dais, just as he was about to continue. The manila envelope was in my hand. I raised it slightly. "Actually, Father," I said, my voice surprisingly clear and steady, amplified slightly by the still live microphone he'd been using. Every conversation in the ballroom ceased. Every eye turned towards me, the girl in the stained black uniform. "I think there's been a slight misunderstanding about whose legacy we're celebrating tonight." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. You could have heard a diamond drop. Earl stared at me, his mouth agape, the self-congratulatory words dying on his lips. Clara's perfectly painted smile froze, then began to crumble. Ariel's eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning horror. "Fiona, what is the meaning of this?" Earl finally spluttered, his face beginning to flush a dangerous shade of crimson. "Get down from there, you're making a scene." "Oh, I think the scene is just beginning, Father," I said, my voice calm, though my insides were a raging inferno. I took another step so I was standing beside him, directly in front of the microphone. I held up the manila envelope. You were talking about Heartstone Manor, about legacy. I opened the envelope and pulled out the deed. The crisp paper felt powerful in my hand. It's a beautiful house, full of history, and as of 3 days ago, it's mine. Absolute silence. Pin drop. Can't breathe. What did she just say? Silence. Then chaos erupted. What? Earl roared, his voice cracking. That's preposterous. You're lying. Clara swayed, her hand flying to her chest. Fiona, this isn't funny. Stop this nonsense at once. Ariel let out a shriek, a high-pitched, incredulous sound. She's lost her mind. Someone call security. Whitney Boyd, her face a mask of stunned disbelief, gasped so loudly it was audible even over Ariel's screech. Trent Norton looked utterly bewildered, his eyes darting between me and Earl. Easton Riley, I noticed with a strange sense of detachment, was watching me with an expression of intense, unreadable interest. It's no lie, Father, I said, my gaze unwavering as I met his furious stare. Heartstone Manor was in foreclosure, due to, shall we say, severe financial mismanagement. A murmur rippled through the guests. Several of them shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with Earl. You defaulted on the mortgage months ago. The bank was about to seize the property. Foreclosure? That's a vicious rumour, Earl bellowed, his jowls trembling. This house has been in our family for 100 years. And now it's in my name, I stated, holding the deed out for him to see, though I kept it just out of his reach. I purchased it, legally, every penny accounted for, from my silly little online venture you so often mocked. The colour drained from Earl's face, replaced by a ghastly pallor. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Clara began to weep openly, fat tears streaking her expensive makeup. No, it can't be. Ariel, however, was pure rage. You conniving little snake, she hissed, lunging towards me. How could you do this to us? To your own family? I sidestepped her easily. The same way you've all treated me for years, I asked, my voice hardening. Like I was nothing? Like I was just here to clean up your messes? The guests were a sea of shocked faces. Some looked horrified, some scandalized, and a few, I noted with grim satisfaction, looked distinctly intrigued, perhaps even a little amused by the downfall of the mighty Hearts. The facade had not just cracked, it had shattered into a million pieces, revealing the ugly truth beneath. This is an outrage, Earl finally managed, finding his voice again, though it was hoarse with disbelief and fury. You ungrateful, scheming brat, after everything we've done for you. Done for me, I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humour. You mean tolerated me, humiliated me, used me as unpaid labour? Is that what you've done for me, Father? He lunged then, not at me, but at the deed in my hand, his eyes wild. This is a joke, a forgery, you ungrateful brat. I pulled the document back sharply, just out of his reach. Leonardo, bless his timing, chose that moment to step forward from the edge of the crowd, calm and collected. I can assure you, Mr. Hart, Leonardo said, his voice professional and firm, cutting through Earl's enraged shouts. The documentation is perfectly valid. I oversaw the transaction myself. Heartstone Manor was legally purchased by my client, Miss Fiona Hart. Earl stared at Leonardo, then back at me, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and utter incomprehension. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a dawning, terrifying understanding. So, I said, my voice ringing out in the sudden, stunned silence that followed Leonardo's pronouncement. As the new owner of Heartstone Manor, I believe the party is officially over. I paused, letting the words sink in. Then, looking directly at Earl, Clara, and Ariel, whose faces were a grotesque tableau of shock and despair, I added, unless, of course, you'd like to discuss tenancy terms? The exodus was swift and awkward. Guests, who moments before had been clinking champagne glasses and laughing at Earl's pronouncements, now mumbled hasty apologies and practically tripped over each other in their haste to escape the imploding social supernova. Whitney Boyd shot me a look of pure venom before scurrying out, no doubt already composing the scandalous tale she'd dine out on for weeks. Trent Norton gave Earl a curt, unreadable nod, and then vanished, his potential new venture likely evaporating with him. Easton Riley was one of the last to leave, pausing briefly at the doorway to look back, not at Ariel, but at me, his expression a curious mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Soon, the grand ballroom was eerily empty, save for me, Leonardo, and the shattered remnants of my family. The string quartet had packed up their instruments and fled, leaving behind a silence that was heavier than any music. Discarded canapes lay on ornate plates, champagne flutes stood half-empty, a testament to the party's abrupt and dramatic end. Earl, Clara, and Ariel stood huddled together, a trinity of disbelief and fury. The fight wasn't over. It was just entering a new, more desperate phase. "You can't do this, Fiona!" Earl finally roared, his voice hoarse. He paced back and forth, his tuxedo suddenly looking ill-fitting and clownish. "I'll sue! I'll have you arrested for fraud. This is theft." Leonardo stepped forward calmly. "On what grounds, Mr. Hart? The sale was conducted legally, through proper channels. Your bank accepted the offer. The title has been transferred. Miss Hart is the rightful owner." Clara, her face streaked with ruined mascara, rushed towards me, her hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Fiona, darling, please," she sobbed, her voice thick with tears. "Think of your family. Think of our name, our reputation. How could you be so cruel? After all we've given you." "Given me," I repeated, my voice cold. "You mean the scraps from your table? The constant reminders that I wasn't good enough? Is that the family loyalty you're appealing to now, Mother?" She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. But this house, it's everything to us." Ariel, who had been watching with narrowed eyes, suddenly exploded. "You just want to destroy us," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You've always been jealous. Jealous of me, jealous of what we have. You're a pathetic, vindictive nobody." She threw herself onto one of the velvet settees, dissolving into a fit of theatrical sobs. I ignored her. My focus was on Earl, who had stopped pacing and was now staring at me, a new, calculating glint in his eye. He was regrouping, searching for a new angle of attack. "This money you used," he said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. "Where did a girl like you get that kind of money? Working in some online shop?" He spat the words out like they were poison. "I built a successful business, Father," I said, my chin held high. "Something you wouldn't understand. It's called hard work." He sneered. "Hard work? Or something else?" He took a step closer, his eyes narrowed. "I know where you got it. You stole it." My blood ran cold. "Stole it? From whom?" "From the family," he declared, his voice rising again, regaining some of its former bluster. He glanced around the empty ballroom, as if playing to an invisible audience. "There was a trust, a substantial one, set aside for Ariel's future, for her security." He jabbed a finger at me. "You found out about it somehow, and you embezzled it. That's how you bought this house, with money stolen from your own sister." My jaw dropped. "A trust fund for Ariel? That's insane. You're lying." "Am I?" Earl reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a sheaf of papers. Bank statements, official-looking documents. He waved them triumphantly. "I have proof. Statements showing irregular withdrawals, transfers to untraceable accounts. It all lines up with when you supposedly started this business of yours." Leonardo stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Mr. Hart, those accusations are baseless and defamatory." "Are they?" Earl shot back, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. He knew he was losing the house, but he could still try to destroy my reputation, salvage some shred of his own twisted pride. "We'll see what the authorities say. We'll see what our friends say when they hear how this viper tricked her way into Heartstone." Ariel, her sobs momentarily forgotten, stared at Earl, then at me, a flicker of greedy hope dawning on her tear-stained face. "A trust fund? For me? Did she really steal it, Daddy?" Clara looked from Earl to me, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "Earl, what are you saying?" I stared at the papers in his hand. They looked vaguely convincing, especially to someone desperate to believe. He must have had them prepared, a contingency for his own financial mess, a way to shift blame if his debts ever came to light. And now he was using them against me. The audacity of it, the sheer, unadulterated gall, left me momentarily speechless. He was trying to paint me as the thief, the villain, after he'd run their finances into the ground. I felt a surge of fresh anger, hotter and more potent than before. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about the truth. "A trust fund," I said, my voice dangerously low. "That's rich, father, considering your spending habits. Let's see how that claim holds up under actual scrutiny." The battle lines weren't just drawn. They were carved in stone. This was far from over. The days that followed the disastrous gala were a tense, ugly standoff. Earl, true to his word, tried everything. He called lawyers, old family retainers, who, after a brief review of the situation and a quiet word with Leonardo, quickly and politely declined to represent him. He made desperate, rambling calls to distant, influential relatives, trying to rally support, but the news of his financial ruin and my shocking takeover had spread like wildfire. The Hart name, once a symbol of affluence and respectability, was now synonymous with scandal and collapse. No one wanted to touch them. I'd given them a formal eviction notice, delivered by a stoic legal courier. They had 1 week to vacate the premises they had lorded over for so long, the premises that were now unequivocally mine. The morning of eviction day dawned grey and drizzly, mirroring the mood. I arrived with Leonardo and 2 uniformed, very large movers, not for intimidation, but for practical necessity. I wasn't about to pack their decades of accumulated possessions myself. Earl was waiting on the grand front steps, his arms crossed, his face a mask of defiant fury. He looked dishevelled, like he hadn't slept in days. He'd aged a decade in a week. Ariel stood beside him, her expression sullen and resentful. Clara hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "You won't set foot in this house, Fiona," Earl bellowed as I approached. "This is still my home. I will not be thrown out by my own flesh and blood." "It stopped being your home when the bank foreclosed on it, father," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And it became my home when I bought it. The notice period is over. You need to leave." "Never." He took a step forward, blocking the entrance. "You'll have to drag me out." Leonardo sighed. "Mr. Hart, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We have a court order. The authorities can be summoned if you refuse to comply peacefully." "Call them," Earl spat. "Let the world see what this ungrateful child has done. Let them see her destroying her own family." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You did this, Fiona. You tore this family apart. All for what? Revenge? This pile of bricks?" Suddenly a choked sob broke from Clara. She stumbled forward, her face ashen. "Stop it, Earl. Just stop it." "Clara, stay out of this," Earl snapped, not even looking at her. "This is between me and this usurper." "No!" Clara shrieked, her voice cracking with a pain so raw it silenced everyone. Even Earl looked stunned. "It's not her fault. It's your fault, Earl. All of it." She turned to me, her eyes wild with a desperate, frantic energy. "He's the thief, Fiona, not you. He's the one who stole." "Mother, what are you talking about?" Ariel asked, her voice a confused whisper. Clara ignored her, her gaze fixed on me. "There was a trust fund," she said, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "A significant one, but it wasn't for Ariel. It was for you." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "For me?" "Yes," Clara cried, tears streaming down her face. "Your grandmother, Earl's mother, she left it for you. She saw your quiet strength, Fiona. She saw Earl's, his recklessness. She set up a trust, secretly, to ensure you'd be taken care of, that you'd have a future, no matter what." Earl stood frozen, his face a ghastly white. "Clara, be quiet. You don't know what you're saying." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying, Earl," Clara retorted, a hysterical edge to her voice. "I've known for years. I've lived with this lie for years. He found out about it after she died, and he plundered it, Fiona. He took every last penny. That's what funded our lifestyle all these years. The lavish parties, the expensive cars, Ariel's designer clothes. It was all your money. The world tilted on its axis. My grandmother, a woman I barely remembered, a stern, distant figure from my childhood, had left me a fortune. And my father. When your money ran out, Earl, Clara continued, her voice raw with accusation. That's when the real trouble started. That's when the debts piled up. That's why we lost this house. His cruelty to you, Fiona, it wasn't just because he favoured Ariel. It was guilt. It was fear. Fear that you'd find out he'd stolen your inheritance, your future. Ariel stared at Clara, then at Earl, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. My clothes? My allowance? It was Fiona's? The fight completely drained out of Earl. He sagged, his shoulders slumping, his face ashen. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just stared at Clara, then at me, his eyes hollow. Then, with a low groan, he collapsed onto the stone steps, a broken, defeated man. Ariel stared at him, then at me, then back at her mother, her perfect world shattering around her, the golden child built on a foundation of lies and stolen money. I looked at Clara, my anger momentarily eclipsed by a wave of complex, conflicting emotions. The years of neglect, the casual cruelty, the constant feeling of being second best. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. So, all these years, I began, the words catching in my throat. The full weight of their deception and my grandmother's hidden faith in me crashed down on me with overwhelming force. Earl didn't get up. He just sat there on the damp stone steps, a deflated husk of the arrogant man he'd once been. The movers, who had been standing by awkwardly, exchanged glances with Leonardo. Clara continued to weep, but her sobs were quieter now, tinged with a strange sort of exhaustion, as if a terrible weight had finally been lifted. Ariel just stared into space, her face pale and blank, the carefully constructed facade of her entitlement utterly demolished. Leonardo cleared his throat gently. Perhaps, he suggested, his voice soft but firm, it would be best if you gathered your personal belongings now. There were no more arguments, no more threats. The fight was over. Slowly, like figures in a dream, they went inside. I didn't follow. I stayed on the driveway, the drizzle cold on my face, watching the house that was now truly mine. The satisfaction of the revenge was undeniable, a deep, resonant hum beneath the surface of my shock. It was complete. But Clara's confession had added a layer I hadn't anticipated, a profound, bitter sadness for the grandmother I never really knew, and a fresh wave of disgust for the man who called himself my father. An hour later they emerged, carrying a few suitcases and boxes. Their movements were stiff, defeated. Earl avoided my gaze. Clara paused in front of me, her eyes swollen. "Fiona," she whispered, I am so sorry for everything." I looked at her, at the woman who had stood by and allowed my childhood to be a landscape of quiet neglect and open disdain. "Sorry doesn't change 20 years, Mother," I said, my voice flat. There was no triumph in it, just a weary finality. She flinched, then nodded, and followed Earl to their remaining, much less impressive car. Ariel was the last to leave. She stopped a few feet away from me, her usual arrogance replaced by a raw, unfamiliar vulnerability. Was it worth it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Destroying us all like this?" "I didn't destroy you, Ariel," I said, meeting her gaze. "You all destroyed yourselves. I just held up a mirror." She had no reply to that. She turned and walked away. Her shoulders slumped. The movers began their work, efficiently and impersonally, clearing out the remnants of my family's life from my house. I walked through the echoing rooms, the silence amplifying the emptiness. The opulent furniture, the expensive trinkets, they all seemed hollow now, artifacts of a life built on lies. Later that day, after the last of their things were gone and the movers had departed, I stood alone in the grand hall of Heartstone Manor. The quiet was immense. It wasn't the oppressive silence of my childhood, filled with unspoken resentments. This was a different kind of quiet, peaceful, expectant. My Aunt Audrey, Earl's estranged sister, called that evening. I hadn't spoken to her in years. "Fiona," her voice was hesitant, I heard what happened. Are you all right? I'm okay, Aunt Audrey, I said, surprised by the unexpected warmth in her tone. Your grandmother would have been proud of you, she said softly. She always said you had a steel spine, even if Earl couldn't see it. A small, genuine connection, a thread to a past I was only just beginning to understand. We talked for a while, a tentative bridge forming over years of distance. I spent the next few days wandering through Heartstone, room by room. It was strange, seeing it through new eyes. The painful memories were still there, like faint stains on the wallpaper, but they no longer held the same power. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the family servant, I was the owner. Would I sell it? The thought crossed my mind. It held so much baggage. But then I'd walk through the gardens, the ones I used to tend in secret, or sit in the library, surrounded by books that had been my only real companions, and a different feeling would emerge, a sense of belonging, a sense of home. The revenge was complete. Earl was a broken man, his reputation shattered, his finances in ruins. Clara, burdened by guilt, would have to live with the truth of her complicity. Ariel faced a harsh new reality, stripped of her privilege and forced to confront the hollowness of her golden child status. They got what they deserved. Karma, I suppose. And me? I was changed, no doubt. Stronger, certainly. More solitary, perhaps, but undeniably free. The emptiness I'd anticipated after the finality of it all wasn't as vast as I'd feared. It was being filled, slowly, by a quiet sense of peace and a dawning excitement for the future. They said I was only good for cleaning up. And I did. I cleaned them right out of my life and took back what was mine. Heartstone Manor is quiet now. For the first time, it feels like home. My home. And the only messes I'll be cleaning up from now on are the ones I choose to make.